This is Jordan Poyer, safety for the Buffalo Bills, and you are now listening to Cover One Buffalo Podcast. Let's go.
Good evening and welcome to the Cover One Buffalo Podcast. You are joining your host, Greg Tompsett, and tonight I'm joined by my partner in crime, Aaron Quinn. Aaron, how's life? It's December.
It's December. I love Christmas. You know that. I've been watching Christmas stuff a bunch, drinking hot cocoa, eating candy canes. So all that's good. But this whole primetime month is throwing me way the heck off, man. I don't like it. It feels weird.
We talked about having our last 1 p.m. football game, and I thought I was ready for that, but I wasn't.
I won't let it ruin my Christmas because almost nothing can crap on Christmas. But it's as close to ruining my habits and all that stuff as it can be, and I don't like that at all.
Yeah, 4 straight primetime games where we're going to have to do post-game shows at midnight for 4 straight weeks. I'm not happy about that.
I haven't been up at midnight in forever.
Past your bedtime. Before we dive in, obviously tonight's show is presented by our friends over at Uncle Jumbo's, and our first half sponsor is our friends over at Paul Bannock, Keller Williams Realty in Rochester. Check out their Facebook page at Paul Bannock Realty. They're there for you before, during, and after the home buying process. Great friends, and we like to compare it to the process that Sean McDermott likes to take people through. Paul Bannock and the team over at Keller Williams Realty will be taking you through the process to make sure you get in the right home as well. Tonight, we are very excited to be joined by our guest. Tonight, you may have seen him throughout many stops in his career, but right now with SB Nation, Rob Guerrera. How we doing, Rob?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be lying. I've been a fan for a while. Definitely someone that's seen some different stops during your way from the days of Mike and Mike and, Fox Sports, all the different places you've gone. Excited to have you on tonight.
Oh, I appreciate it. Yeah, it's been a crazy trip, but happy to be here.
Good for you. So as we kind of dive in and get into this game, it's kind of fun that, as you go in these 4-year divisional rotations, there's teams that just change so much while you're going back and forth. And I think that from the last time the Bills and 49ers played, which was a just shellacking right as the rise of that 49ers initial run, and I think there's so much excitement about what many people will say is the brightest young mind in football, at least offensively, in Kyle Shanahan. But then obviously some deflating moments with the injuries and the things there. So before we dive into this game specifically, just what are your thoughts on the season so far and what, maybe let the air out of the balloon early and now is starting to round back into shape a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, keeping in mind that we're talking about football in a year of 2020 that's been terrible for so many people, but just from a football standpoint, I mean, this has been the season from hell for the 49ers. I mean, the injuries, obviously every team is going to have injuries. It's 100% injury rate sport, but the 49ers had seemingly a season's worth of injuries all at the same time. Think about when they played the Packers earlier this year. Literally every single person that touched the ball on offense that played in the NFC Championship game was out for that game against the Packers. Every single, including the center. Like, it has been just a constant disappointment. They are losing guys for the season every single week. Now, like you said, hopefully the feeling is that we've sort of rounded the corner on that and that we're coming back from it. Mostert's back now. Brandon Ayuk is back. Dabo Samuel is back. It's only going to be the 5th time all year that all 3 of those guys have been on the field at the same time. So hopefully we're sort of past that, but at the same time, I wouldn't be shocked if the 49ers lost 2 more people after this game.
Honestly, it's been one of the roughest weeks for me, who I like to take a long look at a bunch of the different stats, DVOA and all these things, and then dive into games. And we're at this point in the season, early in the season, Greg and I, those first 3 weeks, it's hard to get a read on teams, even through film, through DVOA isn't quite accurate at that point, any of that stuff. So you don't really get a read. That there's a sweet spot that kind of builds up where you can still watch all the games through weeks 4 through 8 or whatever. We can still watch all the games in a week and get a feel for a team. When you get to this part of the season, it's kind of hard. You got to pick and choose some games to watch on a team because I don't have all the time in the world. And you kind of use those stats to lean into to get ready to talk about a team. The Niners, dude, you can't rely on any of these stats. You can't rely on DVOA because they just haven't put it together. So if you're a guy, and I know a lot of fans go and look at just even the overall right? The overall stats, not even the stats with context. The stats with context right now are meaningless for the 49ers, let alone the overall stats. And even going back and watching games, man, I'm watching games where there's guys not even playing that I know are going to be there on Sunday, like that you can't get a read. And that's a really scary thing for somebody who likes to go into the game feeling like I know who this team is that we're playing. And I don't know who the week 13 San Francisco 49ers are. I just don't.
Yeah, offensively especially, I mean, you really can't know because, like I said, they haven't had their biggest three, well, not their biggest three, but they haven't had their two starting wide receivers and their starting running back on the field more than a handful of times this year. I can't say defensively, this team has been pretty consistent all year. They can't really sack the quarterback, but their coverage has been awesome. So they've been consistent defensively, but offensively, that's why I'm so excited for this week, because I feel like we're starting to get some of the pieces back that I think that we could really start to see the offense that Kyle Shanahan envisioned, with a lot of interchangeable parts and a lot of unpredictability where anyone could be lined up at any spot on any play. And that's what I'm hoping to see from the 49ers this week, just sort of like a kitchen sink game where we're throwing everything at you.
Well, that leads us right into our first topic here. And I think that some Bills fans, when you have a cross-country opponent that you see every 4 years that, you know, has had moments in primetime games, but you're not seeing all the time. They know the name George Kittle. They know Jimmy Garoppolo. They know some of the bigger names. And I think when some, you know, casual fans see that, oh, Garoppolo and Kittle are out, this is great, they're going to get a cakewalk with this team. You know, I caution fans, when you see the athletic weapon that the combination of, you know, heck, if you took off their jersey numbers and just stood them next to each other with Raheem Mostert, Dabo Samuel, and Brandon Ayuk, and you asked which one's the wide receiver and which one's an outside receiver and which one's a running back, they're just three athletes that you can throw all over the place. And having the three of them back with Kyle Shanahan's mind, and, you know, I've in the kind of prep for the show, I've heard all the debates of, are you actually better off with Mullins or with Garoppolo and all those different things. I think it's close enough that it's not a material drop off. I don't think that it's some big win. You know, it's not Josh Allen to Matt Barkley. I can tell you that. So having somebody who can still conduct an offense, what are some of the things that you think Shanahan might throw out there now, having all three of those weapons available to him?
I think that Kyle Shanahan's entire game plan is going to be centered around avoiding 3rd and 7. He is terrified of 3rd and long. He does not want that because he does not have faith in Nick Mullins, who I call Big Pick Nick, because he always throws a crushing interception, usually in the other team's red zone, that kills the offense and kills the momentum. He's going to do everything he can to avoid that. So I think you're going to see a ton of Raheem Mostert, especially on the edges. The 49ers run blocking has been inconsistent this year, but Mostert is so fast that he almost doesn't need that much blocking because he's through the hole so quickly. So I think he's going to try to attack the edges of the defense with Mostert. You're going to see speed sweeps with Dabo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk to try and get out on the edge. And then Nick Mullins is going to live in the middle of the field. In between the hash marks is where he's going to attack, whether it's Jordan Reed at tight end or Dabo Samuel on some slants. He does not have the arm strength to beat you outside the hash marks, especially down the field. That is not some area that the Bills are going to have to worry about. You're going to have to worry about the edges of the defense and the middle of the field.
And that's where I'm really interested, because early in the season, I was petrified of this game because the Bills' run defense was horrible, and Shanahan's the most creative run game coach in the last while, probably since his dad. So going along those lines, it's something where recently the Bills' run defense has come back around a little bit, and they've started to figure some things out. You know, the Chargers got Austin Eckler back and got held to 23 carries for 72 yards, and it gave me some hope that, okay, maybe they're getting this back together. They're, you know, showing a little bit better contained, short of, you know, obviously the big final play against Kyler Murray. They did a halfway decent job keeping contained, but the Cardinals gashed them up the middle several times, breaking off big runs. So getting in that spot, I think the Bills are exactly at the counterpoint of what you mentioned, because if they can get Mullins into 3rd and 7, and you can let Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde start disguising coverages where you can't tell where they're going to be, and they're excellent at throwing that at, younger, less experienced quarterbacks that just did it to Justin Herbert. It's something where that is going to be the difference. And I'm really interested in the game script this week, because if the 49ers can get out to an early lead and lean on that run game, I think it could go really strongly in their favor. If the Bills get out to an early lead and they take away that option to be as disciplined to the run game, what are some of the things that you think that could turn Mullins into or force their hand in previous games where they've not been able to keep it close early?
Well, that will turn Nick Mullins into a pumpkin, pretty much, because if he gets down by more than 10 points, he's not the kind of guy that's going to be able to put the team on his back and lead him down the field. The 49ers have not shown an ability this year with any consistency to get big chunk plays down the field. It's the one difference from last year. Last year, they really were good, whether it was Mostert or just receivers or Kittle on a big play. They got chunk yardage, 20, 25, 30-yard plays. They are not getting those this year, especially with any consistency. So if they are down by multiple scores, they're going to have to put together 10, 11, 12 play drives, and those take a lot of time, and you got to be on it. You got to consistently make plays, and that's what Nick Mullins doesn't really do. That's the nightmare scenario for the 49ers. They need to take care of the ball, and they need to avoid giving up big plays, and they need to get ahead of the chains, because if they don't, they're in real trouble. The game script can turn against them very quickly.
One final one on offense here. I thought one of the underrated moves early in the season, especially before all the injuries happened, was the Trent Williams trade. I thought that was such a great pickup. McGlinchey hasn't been perfect at the other tackle, but as a name people know. How's the interior of that line been holding up, where obviously there's much less name recognition in the guys that are coming out there?
Well, they're on their third string center, so that right away should tell you that the things are not great. The way it breaks down on the offensive line for the 49ers, the left side is very strong. Trent Williams and Laken Tomlinson are strong. That's the strength of the offensive line. From center over to the right, it's not very good. I'm going to be honest with you. There are multiple plays every game where Mike McGlinchey is on his back. I've seen him get trucked by a defensive back at one point this season. He got knocked over, which is incredible to me. He was a top 10 overall draft pick. Colton McKivitz, a rookie, is starting at right guard for the 49ers. He struggled. Now, granted, last week was against Aaron Donald, and everybody struggles against him. But the right side of the offensive line for the 49ers has really struggled at times. That is clearly the vulnerability from a run blocking standpoint and from a pass rushing standpoint.
I'm excited from a Bills standpoint that I know McGlinchey still has decent feet and can move well, but when the Bills have all of their pass rushes, power guys like Mario Addison, AJ Epinesa, guys like that who are collapsing the pocket, I'm excited to see how that part of it goes, because that's certainly been, from at least the lowlights that you see, the gifs running through Twitter, that McGlinchey certainly struggled with a couple of those this year. How about the defensive side of the ball, Aaron?
Yeah, so I was excited that I got to do the defensive side of the ball in this matchup, because I love a lot of the pieces that the 49ers have on defense. And obviously not having Bosa is a huge blessing after seeing what the other Bosa did to us this past week. And seriously, I do not want back-to-back weeks of those brothers touching my quarterback. So it's good that they're out. But that doesn't mean I think a lot of Bills fans will see that he's out and that this is going to be some easier game. I think that the 49ers are sneaky top 10 defense in the NFL, and not enough people are talking about that, because if they are going to go on this magic run that I think some of the national media is starting to talk about while they're here in Arizona, I think the Bills are probably the hardest matchup for them defensively, but I think that's going to rely on this defense a lot, and I do think they can go on quite an interesting run. Overall on this defense, talk about, because I like the players at each level of this defense, but as an overall scheme, tell us a little bit what they're doing this year with the offense struggling, kind of keeping them around in this thing and still being in the playoff hunt.
Yeah, as much as Kyle Shanahan gets a lot of love, and he does deserve it, Robert Saleh, the defensive coordinator, should get just as much love. I think he's a guy that's going to be in a lot of head coaching conversations after the year. Only 3 teams have given up fewer passing yards than the San Francisco 49ers this year, and that's with their top 2 pass rushers missing the entire season. Dee Ford and Nick Bosa have both, Bosa played, one game, and he's been out for the whole year. But the 49ers are getting it done, and they're getting it done because their secondary has been incredible. and they've even had some injuries, but the guys they've had out there, Jason Verrett has totally regained his form. He was a first-round draft pick that played well, but had
just injury after injury.
Torn ACL, blew out his Achilles. He's finally come back from all that. He appears to have regained his speed. He just chased down Cam Akers on a 60-yard run last week, which was incredible. The secondary is the strength of the team for sure. Richard Sherman is back now, so you've got Sherman and Verrett on the outside. You've got Jimmy Ward at safety, who basically does whatever you need him to do. He can play in the box. He can guard a receiver in the slot. He can guard a tight end. He's been fantastic this season. And Fred Warner from the middle linebacker position.
I'm still mad the Bills didn't get Fred Warner. I loved him all draft season.
Yeah.
I mean, to get him in the third round, I cannot believe that they were able to do it. Aaron Rodgers told him he's the best linebacker in the game. Tony Romo said he's the best linebacker in the game. Look, I don't know if I'm qualified to make those statements. I'm a little biased, but I know he's pretty damn good. And I'm certainly glad he's on our team.
That's one of the reasons I was really excited to do defense because of watching them all. It was a pleasure to watch Fred Warner play. I think you guys have one of the, if he's not the best, he's right there, one of the best young linebackers in the game and probably should be for 10 years. And that's an awesome feeling to have. So congratulations. A guy that was pretty disruptive that I saw on film was Armstead. That length. He's not getting a lot of splash plays, but that length, he's always seems to be disruptive. And obviously you guys are a little bit banged up along the defensive line. Talk about, him, and even Kinlaw's starting to kind of come along here this year. Talk about some of those guys and how they're stepping up to the plate along that line.
They're not a defensive line that's going to win the rep really quickly and get into the backfield and blow the play up. But they are a defensive line that is high motor guys across the board. Kerry Hyder, Kevin Givens, Armstead, Kinlaw, they just don't ever stop pretty much. So, and with the secondary being as good as it is, they really can collapse pockets on guys, and that's where a lot of their pressures have come from. They're not exactly going to get off the snap really quickly and disrupt things, but, I mean, with the secondary the way it is, it complements the defensive line. They're going to be stout against the run, especially Eric Armstead. He's one of the best run defenders in the entire league. So they're going to force you to pass and force you to play into the strength of the defense, which is the secondary.
Yeah, so let's talk about that a little bit because the Bills have had their most success, obviously, when the offense is spreading things out, passing the ball. I assume that is going to be the majority of how they attack going forward, even this week. But I look at this matchup and say, I don't know that that's a good plan. We talk about toxic differential, big plays. San Fran doesn't allow for a lot of these big passing plays. So I don't know how the Bills are going to get a couple of those big plays in this game. If you're, as a fan who's watching the 49ers, what are your concerns about this Buffalo Bills offense and how they can attack this defense and some of the weaknesses you have, if there is any?
No, there's one huge weakness, and that is running quarterbacks. Even last year when the 49ers had all their guys, they were very susceptible to quarterbacks that can scramble and gain yards with their feet. And this year, the same thing has happened. Kyler Murray gashed him in the first game of the season with everybody there again. Russell Wilson's had success. Daniel Jones even had some success. The 49ers' kryptonite on defense is quarterbacks that can run. If I were Sean McDermott, what I would say is, if your first read isn't open, take off. Because the 49ers secondary is good enough to shut things down, but that's going to be the area of the field where they suffer because Josh Allen's going to be able to run against them. He's going to be able to gain yards and move the chains. And honestly, if you're looking for a big play, that might be where it comes from. It might be him with his feet breaking off a 30-yard run.
Interesting. Well, hopefully that knee ankle that popped up here holds up.
Oh, I didn't hear about this.
Yeah.
The other Bosa brother had him twisted down, and honestly, it looked in real time like Dak Prescott's injury. Like it bent back like very much the wrong way. Everybody panicked and assumed, oh my gosh, he left for one play. It came back in one play
after
later.
Matt Barkley got murdered by Bosa.
One play, one sack. It was terrible. And then all of a sudden, everyone's like, I guess he's all right.
But he kept the game in a brace and he ran for on the injury.
Had a rushing touchdown in the second half afterwards. But we were all kind of freaked out about it to see where it goes. So I'm curious if they let him all the way back to rush it.
Yeah, we'll see. But do we want to put him on the spot, Greg?
Yeah, one last spot. We've had a good run where the Bills have had a material difference or advantage on special teams versus a lot of teams. Coming into a game with Mitch Wisnowski, Robbie Gould, even Trent Taylor back there. How's the Niners special teams been this year? Because it's certainly, from a kicking standpoint, I know they're doing well. How's the coverage and return game been?
The 49ers cannot have a good returner. I think it's written down somewhere that they're just not allowed. They have Ted Ginn for 1 year when Jim Harbaugh was the coach. Other than that, the returning game for the 49ers is terrible. I clench up, I pucker every time there's a punt because I'm worried the 49ers are gonna muff it. And they never have a good returner. You have nothing to worry about from that perspective at all, I promise you. The coverage has been fine. They've let up some plays. I wouldn't call it particularly great, and I wouldn't call it terrible. I would say average at best. And Robbie Gould is an accurate kicker inside of 50 yards, but 50 or more, it's flip a coin time. He missed one last week over 50. He's 38 years old, so you take what you can get at this point. But I would say special teams, they're average. They are also, by the way, on their second long snapper of the season, just because no position is immune to the horrors of 2020.
Yeah. That's a crazy one to run through. We're very fortunate to have one of the two Ferguson brothers, and have his brother Blake is down in Miami. So now that we've run through the matchups, what's back and forth here, semi-home game now on the road, and all the weird, just because there wasn't already enough weirdness in 2020. What do you think we're going to see this game? This week? What kind of game on Monday night, and what's your prediction of the score?
I think it's going to be a fun game. I think it's going to be a game where the offenses can move the ball a little bit. I think the 49ers are going to be able to run the ball, and I think the Bills are going to be able to move the ball. I mean, Stephon Diggs is still incredible. He's still going to make his plays. Like I said, I think Josh Allen's going to be able to run it. So it's going to be a fun game offensively to watch. I could be drinking the Kool-Aid a little bit and maybe riding too high after a divisional win last week. I could see the 49ers winning as long as Nick Mullins doesn't totally screw it up, which is a distinct possibility. But assuming that doesn't happen, I could see the 49ers winning like a 24-21 game.
So I respect it. I think Vegas has it right there as a 2.5-point game, so they're certainly not expecting a blowout in either direction.
Right. Awesome, man. Well, I appreciate it.
Can I just say, because I have to...
Go ahead.
Can I sneak in one thing before we go? I'm sorry.
Yeah, please.
Sean McDermott never gets enough credit for when all the good young head coaches are talked about. It's always Kyle Shanahan. It's always Sean McVay. It's never Sean McDermott, and I do not understand why. This guy makes the playoffs with the Bills regularly. And no offense, nobody makes the playoffs with the Bills.
We've noticed.
Marvin Levy was like the last one. Sean McDermott deserves a ton of love, and I think the AFC East is going to be the Bills' division for years to come.
Oh, you can have the floor as long as you want. You keep talking like that.
Keep going. We appreciate it, and it's something that I think. Honestly, somebody in the comments here while you were going through there, I think there's a lot of Robert Saleh, along the lines of Sean McDermott, and people fall in love with Brian Flores. There's a lot of Sean McDermott and Brian Flores, like that kind of. I think those are the kind of guys that, if you combine with the right offensive mind, and obviously, if a team comes along and they come along with a package and Robert Saleh says, hey, I can't bring Kyle Shanahan, but I could bring one of the other offensive minds that are here and you can go along there, that kind of leader and structural person to build the culture around a team can work in today's NFL, and Sean McDermott's a great example of it.
Yeah, and I'll fluff you back a little bit because Sean McDermott was asked about his interview with the 49ers when he was a candidate this week, and he talked about how positive of an interview it was, how thorough it was, and how good of a job they did hiring on their side, and how he felt good about that franchise, and that having a GM and coach in lockstep the way that they've done is exactly what the Bills are trying to replicate here. So I do think the lack of success you had this year, I don't think is due to the coach and GM and the front office that you have. It's due to the lack of luck in such a weird year. And I see a bright future. Yeah, I see a super bright future under Kyle Shanahan with the 49ers, kind of in that same way. I think they could have taken Sean McDermott and probably had success, but I think they made the right move.
Well, after you fire Jim Harbaugh and hire Jim Tomsula and Chip Kelly back to back, You would hope they would eventually figure out how to hire a head coach.
Well, as a Michigan fan, I got to say I'm mad that you guys fired Jim Harbaugh because now we're stuck with him.
He is. I'm sorry.
Don't worry, not for too much longer.
Yeah, that's true. He's out of his mind. He is insane, that guy.
It's true.
Well, Rob, let the folks know where they can find any of your other work and some of the other things you've been working on.
Oh, you can go to the SB Nation NFL show. I host 2 podcasts there a week, and I'm also the audio producer for the Niners Nation podcast network. I do a daily show there every day, plus a couple of longer shows. So if you check out the Niners Nation podcast, you're bound to hear my voice.
Awesome, man.
Thank you so much, man. Appreciate you giving us some time tonight. Looking forward, hopefully, to a fun game on Monday night.
Yeah, good luck this weekend.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Appreciate it, Rob. All right, that's fun. It's always great to be able to talk with somebody who, obviously has a great understanding of the kind of game that we're going through, and that, we talk to a lot of people who cover teams, but somebody who's also a genuine, passionate fan on top of an analyst. That's always fun to be able to go through. I thought that was great to be able to talk with Rob. And I think Bills fans need to caution themselves that his prediction's not crazy. the 49ers can win this game. The Rams are a darn good team, and they just beat the Rams. And that this is a real team, and they are shorthanded, but they're still really good.
Yeah, they have enough talent. They have a good enough defense to keep them in this game. Yeah. I do think both, no matter who it is, whether it's Mullins or Garoppolo, is going to be the Achilles heel of them moving forward. I think they do have a shot to be one of these teams. We've been talking about it for weeks. All you need to be able to do is go on a run at the end of the season to become a good playoff team. They have a shot to do that. That's not out of the realm of possibility for them. Quarterback is going to be the thing right now that holds them back from that. So I do think that Rams game I watched back twice is super fluky. It's a super fluky game, so I'm not also going to put too much into that. I think the media is putting a little bit too much into that and trying to build up this story that, hey, this
Dabo was the only part that made me nervous watching that.
Definitely. Mozart makes you a little nervous too watching.
He could break a big one.
Yeah, and they haven't been able to do that this year. They're one of the worst right now in the league at breaking big runs, which is pretty odd. They're 23rd ranked in the league at toxic differential runs, which I think some of that has been lack of health across the board, not having that whole unit healthy. But yeah, they have things you have to worry about. But again, this is a quarterback-driven league still, dude. Yeah. We know that better than anybody over the last 10 years. And I don't know. I think a guy like Samuel can keep you in a game if it's close with some of those trickery plays and the run plays like that. But at the end of the day, I don't know that I trust Mullins to beat the Bills defense.
I agree. And I'm certainly not going to predict a 49ers win, and I do think that the Bills can win and probably cover, but I don't think I've heard a lot of people talking about this like a blowout, like an easy game, or like they're coming into some terrible. This is not playing the Jets. This is not even playing the Chargers. That this is a talented team that is, and the biggest difference is they're probably not significantly more talented than Los Angeles, the Chargers. They're probably not on paper. They are exponentially better coached. And they are going to be one of the best coach teams that the Bills play. And anytime you have talent and a really well-coached team, you have to be careful. So the combination of Kyle Shanahan and Robert Saleh are two of the best as far as if you ranked all the different coaches of who's your least good coach on offensive and defensive side of the football, they have the highest floor of anybody in the league because both of them are excellent and there's no downside to what they do. So the Bills, I think you're right that Mullins is the difference maker in this game for the Bills side, but it needs to be, because if they get an early fluky special teams defensive touchdown, break a long run, get a turnover and another score, and they get a lead, they could absolutely stay in this game and pull off an upset, because if you let Kyle Shanahan play with the right game script with his unbelievably creative offensive mind from a running standpoint, I do think it can give the Bills some problems, and that I really want to see. This is critical to have the Bills jump out early in this game.
Yeah, and we saw the Bills struggle with a similarly good offensive mind, even though they got out to that early lead with the Rams. The Rams came right back in that game, and Shanahan has that ability too, even with a not great quarterback. If you don't really put the game away, he can put points out. Like, they can get some splash plays now that their guys are back. So there's definitely concern here. And I do think for Bills fans that are thinking that this is going to be a blowout, I definitely don't think it is. And if it does go in the other direction, like when you look at the remaining schedule, and I don't say like this is definitely not a must win for the Bills, it'd be a nice one to win and it would help pad you, because I do think the Dolphins are probably going to win also this weekend, which I don't want to hear about them being tied and have to deal with that for a week. But if there's a game to slip up or lose on the remaining schedule, this has got to be it. Like, if you are going to drop one of these games, this is the one I feel like you would prefer to drop if you have a preference of losing a game.
Yeah, from a tiebreaker standpoint, it's the only NFC game remaining.
Yeah.
From the impact on divisional, conference wins, division wins, tiebreakers, it certainly would be the least impactful. So if you told me they were going to finish with a 4-1 record over these remaining games, this would be the one that I would choose to do. And that could be a silver lining if something fluky happens to it here. But we'll see. We'll get to our predictions here at the end. But first, let's dive into some of our friends over here at Uncle Jumbo's, being able to go through
that place.
It's delightful. So whether you're enjoying some of their delightful new products, they have the orange cream soda and root beer that's available now, as well as the blueberry lemonade and their wonderful vodka itself. For tonight's player spotlight, we wanted to go through a little bit to talk through, I was on Breaking Buffalo Rumblings earlier with our friend Anthony Marino, and he asked me an odd question about, does this surge in play from AJ Klein impact the negotiations with Matt Milano long term? And it was a good discussion, and I don't think it's that simple. I don't think that it's a direct correlation on those things. But let's bring that back into the near term. And I will say, although it may not be that direct of a correlation on his contract, I do think there's an impact on how we deploy Matt Milano coming back here, and that I don't think there's a need to rush Matt Milano back into a 100% snap role right off the bat. But also, I don't know that I'm ready to have AJ Klein off the field and only playing 20% of snaps. I think he's bringing something to the team right now. And I'm actually looking forward to, at least for the first week or two, and especially against a team that I think is going to try to run the ball against us. I kind of like playing maybe a little bit more base defense with 3 linebackers on the field than we have when we've been one of the most nickel-heavy teams all year. What are your thoughts on how we're going to see managing the surge from AJ Klein and how to ease back in one of our most critical and talented players that we want on the field in Matt Milano?
Well, first of all, this is true, Alex Smith. I do drink tea. It's not whiskey in there, Uncle Jumbo's right now. That only comes after heart-wrenching losses or emotional victories. Do I get digging into the Uncle Jumbo's during the show? But with Milano, man, it's tough to gauge right now because I don't know where his health is. I really have no idea if I'm totally cool here over the next 2 weeks of ramping him back in. If there is concerns with the health, these types of injuries can spring back up at any point. So Sean McDermott's not going to tell us. We're not going to get any indication of his health without the ability to meet for the media to really be in practice and see what's going on. We're just not going to know until game time. So I'm not going to be mad if Matt Milano doesn't come out and take a majority of the snaps in the first week back. But if he is healthy, I definitely want him back in the majority of the snaps. And I like what AJ Klein has been able to do in his absence, but I think that AJ's success is a mix of his being able to process the defense a little bit differently, but also the coach's scheming situations for him to be successful in. And that's awesome. That's a kudos to Sean McDermott and Leslie Frazier, almost more than AJ Klein
probably
being able to
equally
process
as much.
Yeah. And I think Matt Milano can do all the things if they think that style of defense works with Matt Milano. I think he can do it and actually better. I like the idea of Matt Milano blitzing better. I think he has more pass rush ability in a one-on-one situation with a running back. I think he can get free from those situations. I like him still sideline to sideline better, and he is just better in coverage. So if healthy.
He's a superior linebacker. Right? Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, and if healthy, you got to have him in there. And I just don't know where the health is. I don't know. This might be a thing for the whole year where he never gets to 100% health, and he is playing in more of a limited role. And maybe the first couple of weeks we just see him in known passing situations like we did when he first came back. I really just have no idea how that's going to go. I feel we have this nice insurance policy though now.
Yes.
I feel a lot better that if it is just third down situations, that we're not super limited by AJ Klein being on the field like we were the first time Matt Milano tried to make the comeback, and we were just waiting for third down to get AJ Klein off the field so that Matt Milano could come back in. So it's a great problem for the Bills to have right now. But yeah, if he's a full go, I think the way this defense is trending, which I think is in a positive direction, I think the DVOA stuff is still a little bit skewed by early season kind of blunders. Even that run defense are right now ranked 22nd against the run defense. The last 3 games don't feel that way to me particularly. So I think they're trending in the right direction, but you get Milano back, man, and that just sets it. I think you can get back to 2019 form here to wrap up the season if he gets back for a game or two at full health.
I think it'd be huge. And the opportunity to where, we caution people that, hey, AJ Klein is not going to be Lorenzo Alexander. He's not that versatile. And I still believe that, but we've now seen the last couple of games that, hey, even if he's not the same player Zoe was, these coaches have figured out how to use him in a really valuable way. And that I love the fact that we don't have to be only a nickel team or a 3 safety dime team or someone that can't have those options, and that based on the same way that we have done such a great job skewing the offense to the weakness of the team that we're playing, I like it that we have that in the tool belt here, that we can go to, not all of a sudden playing 70% base defense, but that, maybe we don't have to play 95% nickel. Or we've had games where Taron Johnson was near 100% of snaps.
Taron has had more slot corner snaps than any slot corner in the league.
Yes.
And it's not even that close.
I'm not advocating that we go away from that, but I wouldn't mind that became 80% or 70%. I wouldn't mind that we can mix in 20 or 30% of base defense, especially in a game like the 49ers, where I'd like to be able to, punch them in the face a little bit and not let them get the run game going. So I'm looking forward to how they're going to do this. I think that you're right in the sense of our initial usage is going to be pretty obvious, where, hey, if it's 3rd and long, it's going to be nickel with Matt Milano and AJ Klein's going to be on the sideline. When it's 2nd and 2, it's going to be base defense, and all 3 of them are out there. What I'm curious about is in the mix. The other part, where is the ratio? Where's the percentage? Where are they going to be putting all these different people? So we'll see where that ends up. I'm curious to see how that comes along. But one other player, and our man Chris here in the chat is one step ahead of us that we want to talk about as well. Another player activated, or not activated, I apologize, I don't use the right terminology, that they've started the practice window,
process, right.
The 21-day practice window, along with Matt Milano, is Tyrol Dodson. And earlier, when Milano went out, we kind of had some hopes for Dodson. He showed some flashes. I think that he's certainly a roster caliber player. I think he is a depth upgrade over a Darren Lee or other Andre Smith or guys like that, because I think he's a good special teams player and can step in limited snaps. So that's exciting as well, to be able to see some quality depth coming back. And I'd be really excited if we got to the point to where our linebackers could be Tremaine Edmonds, Matt Milano, AJ Klein, Tyler Medikevich, Tyrol Dodson. That's the 5 we wanted to start the season.
Right.
That's really getting exciting.
Yeah, the best part about all this is that we don't have to see Darren Lee, I don't think, this year, unless something goes really wrong. A month ago, we really weren't sure what that scenario was.
We might have been depending on somebody coming up the street like that.
Yes, and this is the best time of year to get these guys back healthy, because it gives them just enough of a sample of a game. Granted, knock on wood, no further injuries to this unit, but it gives them just enough of a sample of a game to get them back together, playing together, because we know that Tremaine and Matt played together for years, but there's still going to be a little bit of getting back in that rhythm of playing together and communicating together. And that's a big part of middle linebacker, even with Taron Johnson and communicating some of that zone coverage with safeties and nickelbacks. Like there's going to be a little bit of a period here of getting kind of shaking some of that rust off, especially for Matt Milano. So that's going to be something to keep an eye on. But yeah, as far as Dotson's impact, I think it goes back to what you originally wanted out of the season, which is he's insurance policy in case of some terrible emergency. In an ideal scenario, I think this team is playing the majority of the snaps, Matt Milano, Tremaine Edmonds, and that those guys are special teams. Klein is a very good special teams player when he isn't being relied to be a linebacker primarily. So I think you want it to be, hey, we have these good depth players behind us, but we have what we believe are superstars at their positions playing for the rest of the month here and hopefully building up some confidence as we go in. One thing I want to address here, because I'm not trying to call Army one out here, but I think that there's a thing kind of online and on Twitter that because of some of the numbers that Klein has been able to achieve the last few games, some of the splash plays and sacks, when you look at some of those sacks, Jerry Hughes handed him a sack a couple. Like he's been
the Russell Wilson one. He literally just went untouched and sprinted from his 2-point stance straight into Russell Wilson's sternum.
I know. Yeah, there's been a couple where he was assisted, where other guys had the guy and he came up and he just happened to be in the right spot. And that's great. He's still part of the collapsing pressure, but I've seen nothing from Klein where he's making pass rush moves. And that's what I think of as like a pass rusher. They are sending him on timely blitzes, giving him free lanes, and he is doing his job and getting home and creating pressures in those situations. But nothing about Klein as a linebacker screams somebody that's going to get on the edge and win with pass rush moves. And that's what I think of when I think of pass rusher as a linebacker that can kind of line up while a Trent Murphy, well, not Trent Murphy, but or somebody drops into coverage and then can win that pass rush. I don't see Klein as being that guy. I think he's more of a timely blitz and he can get home on a clean blitz.
And if you happen to be the person on Twitter who keeps trying to tell us that Tremaine Edmonds can move to edge rusher, that's not right either. So
yeah, he doesn't have any moves.
Stop saying that.
There's no pass rush moves. He's fast if he gets a clean
I want to
lane
use
off the
the
edge.
Analogy. Like, I get it that he has the build of what you see in defensive ends. That's no different than saying, hey, I bet Josh Allen will be a good tight end. Like, it's literally the same thing. Well, sure. But it's like, yeah, just because he looks at it doesn't mean he knows how to do that. Like, that Dawson Knox is also a big, good athlete that can't figure out how to play his position just because he's a big, good athlete.
Right.
Switching over to our friends here at West Her and Let's Talk Numbers. If you're looking for a vehicle in Western New York, 23 dealerships, the largest automotive group in New York State. West Her has you covered from start to finish. Any vehicle that you're looking for, make sure to check them out. Aaron, as we talked a little bit about some of the things we wanted to go into here about Let's Talk Numbers and where those things are coming from. I'm going to put you on the spot because I was surprised at what I discovered here. So the Buffalo Bills are doing reasonably well in the NFL, and they started out pretty rough. So actually where they've gotten to now from a sack production standpoint is actually a pretty healthy improvement. So if I had to ask you, how many different players on the Buffalo Bills have recorded a sack right now, what would your guess be?
Let me think here real quick. I'm going to go with 8.
That's a very reasonable guess. That would make a lot of sense. It's 16.
Jesus.
16 different Buffalo Bills have recorded a sack, counting that they gave a half a sack to Tre'Davious White and Dean Marlowe, and I counted them. So 14 have a full sack, and Trey and Dean Marlowe each have split a half a sack.
Yeah.
16 different players. So when I actually got into this with our friends Drew and Chris over at Rockpile, and I made a prediction early on that the Bills were going to end up with 50-plus sacks and be a top 5 sack team, but without anyone in double digits, and that it was going to be a team effort with a whole bunch of guys with 6 to 8 sacks. And it started pretty rough in regular Drew form. He was picking at me about it. But I will say the Bills are now in position where they're 7th in the NFL in sacks.
They have 30 total.
And they have 30 sacks, and they're on pace to get into the mid 40s there. And maybe they don't get to 50, but I think they're going to get into that healthy range. I think they could be top 5 in sacks, and I don't think anybody's going to have double-digit sacks. And it's going to be this kind of schemed up team pressure. And, the fact that Ed Oliver has 2 sacks is comical. He's responsible for a ton of those 16 different guys having sacks.
Yeah.
And I know there's somebody that you think is responsible in a similar way.
Yeah, Ed is definitely. I'm so sick of the people trashing Ed Oliver and saying, "Well, we drafted this guy to be a game-wrecking interior lineman." He is playing out of position and is still wrecking plenty of plays. It shows up all over tape. They're just pressures. Pressures get understated by fans. They just do. It's not a sack. It's not something we can look up at whatever Pro Football Reference or stathead.com or whatever those are, and you can just look up sacks. Sacks are great. They're super inflated. We've talked about it a lot with Jordan Phillips. Had one of the most inflated sack seasons I think I've ever seen. You can stumble into a few sacks, and other people that I've been advocating for years, almost like in hockey, having assists and like double assists on goals. I think there should be an assisted sack statistic that counts for players, because a guy like Jerry Hughes, who
as a hockey expert, I appreciate the fact that we should have hockey assist sacks. And
you are a hockey expert. I knew that about you. Jerry Hughes is sneaky, having maybe one of the best outside of Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs and maybe Deion Dawkins. He's probably been the most consistent, best Buffalo Bills player. I think on defense, he's been the most consistent and best and most disruptive Bills player. But when you look at a stat sheet or you look at the box scores, it doesn't show up. But in pressures, he's top 10 edge rusher according to PFF. He has 42 pressures for the year, so he's right up there with the top 10 edge rushers of the year. I think he's playing at a sneaky Pro Bowl level. He won't get Pro Bowl because he doesn't have the 10 sacks. I don't know if he'll get to 10 sacks here at this point, but he hasn't lost a step. This was a guy that I was worried was going to really start to drop off, because that cliff can come at any point at his age, and it can really. And I think a lot of fans thought he was losing a step because the pressures were not converting into sacks early in the season. But if you go back and watch the tape, a lot of those AJ Klein sacks, a lot of other guys' sacks are either, like you mentioned, an Ed Oliver or Jerry Hughes collapsing the pocket, making a guy move away. A lot of the lack of success Herbert had last week was not even guys getting home on sacks. It was just moving quarterbacks off their spot, getting them out of spot and making them throw an errant throw. Like, sacks are cool. Pressures are cooler. They really are. Like, sacks definitely change a game and you can get a big loss, but you're going to get consistent pressure more often. And if you can do it at a level that's top 10 in the league, you're going to cause a lot of opportunities for your defense. And we're seeing that start to play out. Sacks are starting to happen. Interceptions are starting to tick up. Like, this Bills defense is getting back to form. And I think a lot of that is led by Jerry Hughes' play.
It's enormous. And when people talk about the kind of player that Jerry Hughes is, when you look at where he is in the NFL in pressures, and you're talking about he's just below that top tier, but he's there right in that top 10 range with Bradley Chubb and Bud Dupree and Chris Jones.
He's got like 8 years age
Mack
on all these guys.
Yeah. Cam Jordan, Cam Hayward, Khalil Mack. Those are Myles Garrett. Those are all the guys around him in the NFL in the number of pressures that he has. He's having that kind of season, and that, yes, would I like it if he had more than 5 sacks? Sure. But I think he's the kind of guy, and a couple people in the chat here said it, he's the kind of guy that can put together a 2-sack game and a 2-sack game and all of a sudden end the season with 10. Like, he's the one guy who could get there in my mind if somebody was going to get to double digits. But I do think he very likely gets to 7, 8, 9 here and maybe gets well over there in the playoffs.
He's got to be creeping up on some Bills, Aaron Schobel.
Yeah.
Those types of guys, right? Like, he's been here so long, and he was
right there. I want to say he came into the season at 49 or something like that, so I think he'd be at 55. Okay. So he's probably got 2 more good seasons to get. I think Schobel was at like 70, 73, 78, one of those two.
He's got to be creeping up towards the.
But yeah, he's right there below there. He's got to be getting close to for sure top 10 area. Besides the Phil Hansen, Cornelius Bennett, and obviously Bruce. But he's got to be right there coming into that top 10 region.
Cool, I like it.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's something that I think a lot of Bills fans got frustrated early in the year. The last couple games in a row, the Bills are right there in tops in the NFL in pressure rate. You see a lot of the stats that I know people poke holes in them. They're not perfect, but pass rush win rate is predictive of good things happening. And if you're consistently beating your man, you're doing that. The Bills are number 2 in the NFL in pass rush win rate, which means one of your players is beating one of their blocks in under 2.5 seconds, and that you're getting there to disrupt the quarterback. If you get to the quarterback in under 2.5 seconds, you're going to disrupt their play. The Bills are number 2 in the NFL in that. They're now number 2 in pressure rate on PFF. They are top 7 in sacks now. They're up there in pressures as well, higher than that. I think they're 4th in the NFL in pressures. So affecting the quarterback is now a considerable impact of what we can do down the stretch here. And now that you're getting more of these players back, that we have, all of the intended defensive linemen healthy and available, we're getting back the linebackers that could allow AJ Klein to be used here and there. We have our secondary back healthy the way that we want, and that they can now afford to maybe be a little more exotic with some of the pressures that are coming from the front. I think we could see a really exciting stretch of where this could come across in the final stretch of this season. I think we could see that. I know you mentioned that 2019 defense, even if it's not that smothering top 2 or 3 in the NFL defense, I think we could see some really strong performance.
Yeah, I think we're going to see, I really believe things are trending in the right direction for this defense as a whole. And I think we see the Bills finish the season as one of the scarier defenses in a top 10 unit. And by most, they probably won't be there in DVOA because the early rushing problems.
Too big of a hole.
I think they're too big. But I think if you broke it down in the last 5 weeks of the season, 4 weeks of the season, I think they're going to be trending in the right direction heading into the playoffs, where they're as close to that 2019 as we've seen them be. And I think that's not by plan because he had some injuries, but Sean McDermott and Leslie Frazier talked about this all through September and October. It's not how you're playing now. We got a long time to go. It's about how you finish the season. You're playing in November and December and heading into the playoffs. And I think that it's lining up exactly like they talked about in the perfect way. Real quick right here, Hughes is 5th, and he's going to pass Cornelius Bennett probably this season.
Nice.
Bennett has 52.5, so he'll probably pass again to 4th, and then he's got Phil Hansen up ahead of him with 61.5. So that's doable that he could get into 3rd.
Wow.
All time Bills, and awesome. There's some nice names on that list, man. I mean, Cornelius Bennett's semifinalist for the Hall of Fame right now. That's no joke.
Yeah, I didn't realize that Schobel was 2nd in the team, and it's so funny because
he had a sneaky career, man.
Yeah, well, when you throw out numbers like 61 and 78, you realize that for other teams those are really, really high. It's hard when Bruce has 200. It makes it really hard to realize that, oh yeah, 78's a lot. I was thinking there were multiple people above there because Bruce just makes it so unrealistic of how
Bruce.
many crazy
And then when you look at Sean McDermott is rising up the wins.
Yeah,
all-time wins total because there just hasn't been coaches here for more than 3 years at a strip. But then you look at Marv,
and then everybody else down here.
Yeah, you look at Marv's numbers, and it's he'd have to be here for 10 years and have success all 10 years to even get close.
Success.
Yeah. So
well, and the same thing. I mean, honestly, Josh is going to start doing that if he sustains this kind of even close to this level of passing. He's going to start passing everybody and is going to very quickly get into number 2, number 3 territory. Because just like that, if you look at the all-time passing records, you have Jim Kelly, and then even some of them with Jack Kemp and Joe Ferguson. They played a lot, but it was in an era where they just didn't rack up the numbers in that way. So they still have a lot, volume wise. But once you get past those 3, it drops off like crazy.
Yeah, he's already 7th all-time passing yards in Bills history, and you nailed it. Because of the modern NFL, quarterback is probably, if you have a good one and you have a bunch of old guys as your top leaders, he's going to fly right up the charts just because of the new era of the game. It's probably the easiest position to fly up a team's all-time leading charts. I think if they can lock down Stephon Diggs for a while, I think he'll also put a stamp on the Bills' all-time receiving records. He's already doing it for single season. I think he has a chance to bust it this year, so we'll see.
So before we get into the questions from the fans, anybody listening here, shoot us your questions. We'll get into those after our game predictions. I'll put you on the spot first.
I was trying to weasel my way out of doing predictions this week by just talking about all-time Bills, but
I liked it. It was fun. I'll start out. I'll start for this time.
Fine.
I do think the 49ers are going to be able to run the ball. I don't think they're going to blow them out. I don't think Nick Mullins is lighting anything up, but I do think Brandon Ayuk or Debo Samuel are the kind of guys who can take a slant 50 yards. Like they can make him look good. I don't think they're going to have sustained drives, but I do think they're going to break a big play or two, and then they'll get into range enough times with a field goal. I think they can squeak out 2 bigger touchdowns on a broken tackle, and then maybe 3 field goals. I have them at 23. And I think the Bills put up enough points. I'm going to go 31-23. I think the running game will run the clock enough that maybe they don't go completely crazy. But I'm going to go Bills 31, Niners 23.
We're not too far apart, man. And I think I do feel similar. I don't think the Bills are going to give up a lot of big plays, but I think they'll give up enough to allow them to stay in the game and to get some points on the board. And then when I say points on the board, this isn't like few years ago where some points on the board was a team scoring 14. Like this NFL, this crazy COVID year, even some points on the board is getting into the 20s. It just is. I have it at 27-24. I do think it's a good defense. I just think, dude, a few people I know were pretty frustrated about the Bills getting a running game and leaning heavily on that. I think that puts so much pressure on the opponents coming up to defend a potential run game like they had, defend the Bills' ability to spread it out with wide receivers and let Josh Allen do work, defend the screen game. You also have to now keep in mind these trick plays. Like you have to practice for some Brian Dabo stupid trick plays if you're a defensive coordinator. Like they have created throughout their body of work for the whole season so much stress on defensive coordinators leading up to the end of this campaign here that these poor defensive coordinators have to account for everything. If you try to take away the one thing the Bills are good at, and I'm not saying the run is totally back and that you can't take that away, but you have to account for it now because it's on tape. And this is a beautiful opportunity for Brian Dabo to come out and really pick his poison against this defense. And I just think that's going to be too much. Not overwhelming. I only have it 27-24, but I think the Bills can score 27 against anyone remaining on their schedule at this point.
No, I like it. Now, I think that's right in the right area that we're going to see. So as we get into different questions here, let's start out with a couple that I think were fun. I'll kick this one to you first. From Thomas Tucker, do you expect to see a 4 wide receiver set this week, obviously with John Brown still out? And if so, who would be the number 4 receiver?
I'd have to go back and look at the personnel packages. I'm sure there will be, but I don't think that's something they're going to go into trying to spread out like that without John Brown. And if they were going to put a 4th wide receiver out there, it's not. I don't know, man. Who was activated last week?
They activated Kumro. They tried.
He's not going to get any.
They did more 11 with Dawson Knox, and that hasn't gone great. I could see them trying to do it with Isaiah McKenzie and having both McKenzie and Beasley in the slot, with Davis and Diggs outside. But the fact that we're struggling with who would do it is why we won't see much of it. I might see maybe we see Tyler Kroft come back active over Lee Smith so that they have an option.
I do think Tyler Kroft will be back. Yeah, and so you'll have better options at 11.
Yeah. So Matt Baggs asked a question that we touched on a little bit earlier. How likely is McDermott's chances of winning Coach of the Year? I'm going to say not nearly as good as it should be because it's a narrative award and it's usually somebody who went from terrible to really good. I think he deserves to be in that discussion, and I'm not putting him on par with Bill Belichick. But guys, like if you come from a good season last year and have another good season this year, they don't give the award to those people. It's going to go to somebody like Flores or somebody that kind of brought back a team from
Tomlin.
Tomlin having obviously if the Steelers go 15-1 or 14-2,
he's going to get it.
He's going to get it. That's going to be the kind of run. But I think he does deserve mention of it. And obviously our guest Rob Guerrera spoke about how he thinks that McDermott doesn't get the love that he should in many of those.
Yeah, and that's just a Buffalo thing. We saw it with the first couple of years of Trey being deserving of All-Pro, not getting it till last year. It's just whatever. I don't think he particularly cares about that, so that's good. Like, his ego doesn't need it. But I think he should, when it's all said and done, if they win 12 games, he should be in the top 3 consideration. For like, if they win 10, 11 and just kind of flop into the playoffs here, then sure, we don't have to talk about it. But if he wins 12 games and they're not talking about him, I'm going to cause a stir in all the national reporters' mentions.
I like it. We did touch on a couple here. We have some questions here, a combination. Taylor asking about the CB2 and also a couple guys asking about Josh Norman. What are your thoughts on what we saw last week? And that obviously we didn't see a lot of snaps. Ben Morrison asking about that as well. We talked about it, that that might be the part that comes into play, that maybe Dane Jackson gives them enough options. Levi Wallace comes back and reclaims the starting spot. I don't know that I expect a lot of difference there. I think Levi Wallace is the starter.
Yeah, I think he's done a really nice job as the starter too. So unless he just really slips up, there might be some potential where if he's having a bad game, they try some other stuff. But he's done a nice job since the somewhat struggles that he had early in the season when he got picked on. He's not been a glaring person that people have really noticed him getting really picked on here the last few weeks. So I think it's his job to lose here going forward. And I was surprised. I don't know if it's, I don't know where Josh Norman's health is at this point, but I was surprised if he is fully healthy. Like, I'm suspecting that he is at this point. I thought there would be more of a rotation with the two of them, some type of rotation this year, but it did not appear that way last week. And I think that trend's going to continue.
Yeah. Alex here asking to give us a chance to brag on our boy here. Why isn't Eric Turner employed by an NFL team?
He has a good job.
One, he has a really good job. That probably pays him more than the film lackey that you would become. Also, I want to brag on him for a minute here. You guys would be shocked how many NFL players reach out to Eric to do film breakdown, cut-ups, scouting combinations. There's a lot of guys who reach out to Eric because he's so good at what he does. So although it's not a job with the NFL, there's a lot of big time people who lean on Eric because he's so phenomenal at breaking the film down.
And to pull back the veil a little bit of, I think there's like a lot of people that are like, oh, I wish I could go work in the NFL. And like, unless you are an offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, or head coach, it's like the least sexy jobs in the world. It's
crazy hours for okay money.
Unbelievable hours. And the lower you are on that, if you're a scout, if you're like an area scout, you are making not very good money. You're traveling all over the country all the time. You don't see your family. It's not just during football season. It's all year long. It is a grind. And it takes a really special type of person. And Eric has a really nice job that he's probably going to be able to retire early from and can do this for fun. So he's got the best of both worlds, man. And I'm kind of jealous of him.
Ian here asking, can you see Brian Dabo getting hired by the Texans or Falcons?
Yeah, I mean, I want to caution some Bills fans, though, because not caution us. I think it's a good thing. I think he will be a hot coaching candidate. I think somebody will fall in love with the idea of what he's done to Josh Allen's career. Yeah. There's other really good coaches out there that are on the market too.
I'll guarantee Brian Dabo gets head coaching interviews.
Yes.
I'm certain that he is going to be on the list of head coach. Matter of fact, I'll go as the first to say I will be shocked if he doesn't get multiple head coaching interviews.
Right.
I think it's 50-50, maybe even a little bit lower, that he gets a job. I think he's one of the top candidates. I think he's probably fourth, fifth,
next tier, maybe.
I think he's in the next tier. Below, I think that you have guys like Joe Brady in Carolina, Eric Bieniemy, some really hot names.
There's going to be some college guys we weren't even thinking of.
Ryan Day wants to come out, if Lincoln Riley wants to come out, Matt Campbell's name gets thrown around a lot. Yeah. I think that I was talking earlier, I mentioned that to Rob Guerrera. I think Robert Saleh, who could also steal, they have two really good run game and pass game coordinators with the 49ers that I could absolutely see a combination where a team goes and says, hey, I want to bring over Robert Saleh and Mike LaFleur or Robert Saleh and Mike McDaniel, and that's a package deal that comes forward. There's going to be some names like that you see kicked around. So
and don't rule out some dumb franchise hiring a retread. Oh, yeah. That also always happens, which takes a job. And Dabo didn't get any interviews
he got 0 last offseason.
And usually guys don't go from 0 interviews to getting a job. Usually it's a 1 year, you go around the league, get some interviews, and then that next year you get a job. It does happen where guys get jobs in that first year, but it's pretty rare. So I don't know that it's a sure thing that Brian Daboll's gone, even if the Bills offense continues on a crazy success over the next month.
I will say, the more names that keep getting thrown out there, the less happy I am, because there's already openings in Houston, Atlanta, and in Detroit. We know there's going to be one in New York, and I think it's leaning that way in Los Angeles for the Chargers. If you see 1 or 2 more than that and you get to 6 or 7 openings, it's going to be tougher for one of those not to be Brian Daboll. So if you're a Bills fan, what you need to root for is Anthony Lynn keeping his job and no other surprise firings and guys like that staying in their position, or maybe Raheem Morris keeping the Atlanta job. Because if only 2 or 3 or 4 head coaches get hired, I think then we could retain Brian Daboll. If it gets more than that, it's going to be tough.
I also think a sneaky, just as concerning thing for me as Brian Dabo leaving is the front office. You're seeing some GMs go, and I think we'll see more GMs go at the end of the year. And the Bills are going to be one of the farm systems, unfortunately, that does get plucked. There's too much talent in this front office that they've amassed. Joe Shane, Dan Morgan, there's a couple other guys, Brian Gain again. There's guys here that are ready to be GMs in other places, and the rest of the league knows that. I can't see us holding on to that front office, and that stinks to me because I love that working relationship they have. And I think that they've built a nice thing here in Buffalo. And my biggest fear is you get one of these teams that have fired their head coach and GM, and they take Dan Morgan and Brian Dable and go try to replicate what Buffalo's done in Detroit or wherever.
Yeah, I'm mad at you for even talking about that.
Yeah.
So 1 or 2 more here. PJ asking, do you think we keep John Brown next year? I actually just had a chance. I mentioned the show that I did with Anthony Marino. I went through a lot of different salary cap iterations. We'll have plenty of time to do that and get into that this offseason, but I'll point you guys to Breaking Buffalo Rumblings. I went through a lot of really nerdy detail on contract extensions, team-friendly extensions, restructurings, releases, different options that the Bills have. I don't think it's as either or as some people are putting it out there that, we either cut John Brown or we have to let Milano, Dawkins, Feliciano, or Milano's, Williams, and Feliciano walk. It's not that simple. I think John Brown, there is a big difference in the offense when he's not there, and I don't think Gabe Davis is quite ready for that yet, but I think Davis is playing well enough. He's going to give them that option next year that maybe you draft another guy, and you could do that. I would predict that John Brown is back next year and probably on a team-friendly extension into 2022 that reduces his cap number.
Yeah, I want John Brown back, and I think Stephon Diggs also wants John Brown back if he has a say in that room, and I think Josh Allen does too. And I'm a believer that Josh Allen's going to get an extension over the offseason, and if he's getting that extension, I think you try to keep in place what has made him successful to this point. He's leaned a lot on Brown. So if there's a way to do it and not hurt yourself, then definitely. I think that he's an important part of the success of this offense.
So appreciate it, guys. You guys were awesome tonight. Really great questions. Fun guest with Rob. I thought he did a nice job tonight. Aaron, what is going on in your world, and where can the people find you?
I am just sitting around watching Christmas movies. I'm going to make some Christmas cookies this weekend. Nice. It's as much as I hate this whole thing of primetime games, I was talking to my wife a little bit the other night. It's kind of nice to have the whole weekend pretty much to spend. I spend a lot of time with my family, but it's really nice here during the holidays to have this extra, even a half a day on a Sunday to have that with the family and then watch some football when the kids go to bed. So that's a little bit of a perk of all these primetime games because there's so many Christmas movies to watch, man. There's only so many hours in the day.
You already gave me some homework. I got 3 of them queued up that I got to work on.
I'm telling you, man. My wife is like, "Why you're watching so many?" And I showed her the list. I like pulled it out and whipped across the floor. I'm like, "So many. We have so many to watch." But you can find me at Aaron Quinn 716, giving my bad Christmas music takes and my bad movie reviews.
Speaking of primetime games, there was a critical question in the chat earlier that I need to address. One, I am wearing a killer new shirt. Really excited.
Let me see it.
Poncho's Army,
nice.
Viva Los Bills. Really excited.
Rest in peace, Poncho.
Yeah, the guys over there really excited about this shirt. Check them out. They're really nice. They're cool shirts. Poncho's Army, Viva Los Bills. Really excited to be have this on tonight. And the regiment does have to change. I'm going to have to move my steak from Saturday to Sunday because you have to make your steak
That's
the day
important.
before the game.
Right.
So I will be doing a Sunday night steak now to make
Why
sure
don't
that I
you
can
do two
prepare.
things?
I debated. I might need to double down. It's you have to bring a little bit extra to the table here. So I'm excited. So definitely going to be enjoying that and looking forward to a nice weekend here and gorging on football myself. So being able to watch games all day. So
It worked. All you trolls in the
so
YouTube
funny.
comments have been bugging me. Or I upgraded my internet today, and so I'm happy that it worked for all you suckers out there that have been trolling me over the 2 seconds that it clicks out every. So thank you.
Funny. That's so funny.
Good to see it work.
So yes, it is. It was super clean all show. So appreciate it, guys. So you've been listening to the Cover One Buffalo podcast. Thank you to our sponsors at Uncle Jumbo's. Thank you to West Her. Thank you to Paul Bannock Realty. We appreciate everybody. You guys were awesome in the chat tonight. For Aaron Quinn and Greg Tompsett, you've been listening to Cover One, and we are out.